A drought worsening in South America, especially in Brazil, and our expectation for the upcoming USDA report. Right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Hello, Jerry. We had a kind of stable market this Friday, not bad, so bad lows. What can you tell us before we talk about South America, which is the big topic?
Well, this week, combinations of various things here. Of course, the weather down there was probably the major part of things as we went up and down. The commercial type activity here and that we started to see some activity here from Argentina to somehow or other supply themselves with some soybeans after they sold quite a few beans to the Chinese over the last 2 or 3 months. And so there's talk there might be as high as 2 million metric tons switching in the new crop, of course, switching from Brazil down to the processing plants there along the Paraná River. From there, the wheat market these days has really been pretty quiet per se. South America's crop is behind us. Australia's crop is behind us. Actually, there's some fear that that number might be a little higher on this coming week's number here, and that we'll see if that is the case. Actually, where the focus is going to be in wheat now on world crops is going to be on India, and that last year late season heat really knocked that wheat crop down. Uh, there was some activity from the Indian government here to go ahead and put some wheat into their markets there to calm down some internal prices that they had in reserve from that standpoint. But at this juncture, U.S. wheat and prices in that have really been dominated by the Russians willing to be selling things at a very cheap value. From there, they did sell another 500,000 metric tons to Egypt here late in the week. And so that's been the big kind of news in that market. But the other thing is interesting here. We're about 6 weeks away from the grain corridor issues in that. And considering the kind of recent approach by the Russians to be beating up on the apartment houses and things like that in the major cities versus really doing much on the battlefield, and that there is a lot of potential concerns here that will that grain corridor be extended. Turkey's very optimistic, but right now that's one of the few out there I think that is. And then this ongoing issue about inspections, this continues to be kind of a ongoing gnaw in the wheat market. But right now, at least, the world and the markets, I think, are looking at South America. I think basically the old adage is you go into weekend and in the commodity markets when they're weather impacted, and usually you've got a little bit of a pullback, and that's exactly what we kind of had today. From there, as but there really isn't much in the expectations for any of your weather forecasters here for South America. Looks like things are going to be pretty well clear skies across Argentina and southern Brazil. There might be some showers up north, and that's really been one of the interesting features here on the Brazilian numbers. One side might be increasing, but Rio Grande do Sul really has got a lot of more notoriety in the last few days here about what's really been going on there. And there's some ideas that both wheat and, soybeans and corn could be impacted pretty good here if it doesn't improve on some rain pretty soon here.
Yes, I would say the impact of the drought in South America will be a lot higher for soybeans, especially because in the great state of Rio Grande do Sul, the soybean production is nearly 20 million metric tons yearly, which is higher than most countries in the world. And corn, not so much. So they can add that to the drought in Argentina. So it's a significant impact on soybeans. So what are your numbers at this point, Jerry?
Well, yeah, that's really right on the soybean side of things here. I think the one thing has been tricky on this thing, both for Argentina and for Rio Grande do Sul. Uh, both of them had dryness. Both of them really didn't step up during December, particularly the first 2 or 3 weeks of the month there, and it's kind of start their post wheat plantings in Argentina and maybe just the seasonal plantings in Rio Grande do Sul, and that because of the dryness. And part of it was too that they didn't get the wheat out in Argentina. So you put that together, and soybeans have a tremendous ability to. What I call is this hunker down. In essence, if they get some kind of growth to them out of the basic seedings and things like that, and that they get past that first oh few say the first 10 days to 2 weeks out there, and get some kind of root system going, they can hang around and get some shade on them and things like that. But if you're in that stage when some of that heat was so intense there in late December and early January, some of those seed leans just didn't make it. So that's not a total disaster for soybeans, because they do have the kind of interesting ability to have less of them out there. They tend to kind of compensate for the reduced number of plants. But the U.S. has been on a big, strong trend of planting as many as you can out there, and you're going to have bigger and bigger yields. At least at this point, there's definitely going to be some issues out there on the crop sizes and that. Soybeans is kind of the most interesting one out there. The trade at this point is looking for pretty good setback of excuse me, from the 45.5 million that we had last month in the USDA. Most of the trade, or the average trade number on this thing is 42.3. Interestingly enough, there's some other private forecasters in that. One of them, of course, is Informa. They came out with their numbers today, and they were clear down at 40 million. And there's some numbers way down below that, even 36, 37 million, things like that. But I don't sense that particularly after the stability rain we got earlier in the week, that we're going to see that number from the USDA. And also, they tend to stair step down the numbers. But the interesting twist on that is that overall, the soybean numbers potentially could be 5 or 6 million metric tons down in South America on beans, because right now there seems to be the attitude, and I guess we'd have to stay that now until we get a better handle on what Rio Grande is doing, is that the northern areas of Brazil, because of the rain, are going to go ahead and kind of compensate for what might be slipping away in Rio Grande at this point. So, interestingly enough, the world's analysts, and I feel kind of the same way, we're going to basically be stable in the 125, 126 number here on corn, and the 152, 153 number metric tons on Brazilian beans. From there, the one thing we haven't touched on has been the Argentine corn. That one also is seeing about a 4 million reduction here from most people. At this point now, you say, well, geez, so corn in the U.S. usually has more impact on heat and that. But I think in this stage right now, we weren't in pollination when this heat was so intense, and there has been some moisture this week. So the 4 million makes sense. To me, at least, a reduction from the 52 down to the 48 million number from there. And interestingly enough, Informa, which tends to have been over the years a champion of producers being able to get a good crop, they came in with 47 million from there. So it's going to be in this 4 to 5 million down. Now, wow, that sounds like that's going to make things go crazy here on U.S. demand. I guess that's going to be the other stage of this thing is what's the USDA took with some of these numbers out there as we go forward on things right now.
Yes, and one thing that I would like to ask you, I cannot pass on that the U.S. cattle herd has been the lowest in decades. And also, I saw very impressive news today about the job market in the United States. Over 500,000 of jobs created in the month of January. And the sector that created more jobs was the leisure and hospitality. So I think there's significant impact on the agricultural sector.
Well, that's the interesting twist on you. Exactly right here about U.S. jobs rates, and that considering that we've had all this news about cutbacks in the tech world, Google and Microsoft and Facebook and all these people cutting back their prospect. We've already heard a huge amount of Twitter employees being on the street from there. The twist of it isn't exactly right. Is that the U.S. restaurant business and hospitality is definitely bouncing back. Either a combination of hotels and people wanting to go places or not so freaked out about getting in the plane and going somewhere, or from the standpoint of just going out to eat at local restaurants. And so that's creates an interesting situation, particularly as you pointed out with the cattle. The cattle side of things here is the combination of dry conditions and lack of pasture and things like that. I don't sense that the U.S. cattle, feeder cattle world and cow herds and things like that really wanted to eliminate the number of cattle that it did last year, but it was the second. What's been going on? Plus the fact that the range conditions out there were so poor, and they just ran out of feed, so they had to go ahead and move those cattle into it. So that, to some extent, puts an interesting combination of pressures in that more people going out to eat. We got less beef out there, which is the primary the meat in the U.S. It's pork's there, chickens is actually there's probably more chicken consumed on a per person at this point, but beef is still the preferred factor in there. So that does make things quite interesting here, which it could, the twist of it is on the beef side, they also consume a lot of corn. And so the less animals out there to feed them through the feed yards, it does suggest that we'll probably end up having some very heavy animals in here. Usually what happens is when you have less numbers and prices high and expenses high, the feed yard world and the beef producers out there tend to produce heavier cattle. So that's another feature down the road that's going to come into this thing accordingly. The twist of it is that when you get to the U.S. ending carryover stocks this month, we've really had a poor export feature going on here. It's been going on since late last summer, and that the Chinese not being really a participant in here. They've had a solid crop, but they are really indicating, and there's a lot of commentary, I guess, one of the first boats of corn from Brazil arrived in China this week, and there's strong indications that there's probably somewhere between 2.5 million of test corn going over to China at this point, and it looks like that That's taken away some of our demand situations. That's why I think that even despite some of the problems here in Argentina and that on corn production, that uh, it's not going to, at this indication, suggest that the Chinese are going to come to the U.S. for corn if they've bought a few tonnage from Argentina over the years, but they have looks like they're getting together with the Brazilians here for corn going forward. So I'm anticipating our exports to be down 50 million. It's not a huge number considering the kind of adjustments we talked about in some of these South American crops. But I think that we are getting to the point of scraping along here on things at this juncture. Soybeans, another interesting situation here. We've had another big, good, solid kind of uh, sales are still about 70 to 80 million above last year. The issues we're starting to see here in Brazil, selling stuff to Argentina, Argentina issues out there. I think it could actually pick up some of our crush situations for exports of meal, because the one thing that we are really looking at here is a pickup in renewable diesel, and I just not sure that the soybean prices are really reflecting that at this point. A lot of things actively going on out there in the U.S., all over the place. Actually, there was some note of a plant out in Nevada, of all places, that changed hands here this last week. So it must be along one of the UP routes that goes from the Midwest out to West Coast, and that. But I think that really is an interesting tale in front of us here, and to some extent, we still haven't got all the implication or the impact of this expansion going on here in the U.S. and how it's going to all play out. We might have some good demand on soybean oil because of the expanded diesel fuel connection there. But at the same time, is we're going to have to figure out where we can sell all the meal that's created from it, because really about 80% of a soybean turns out to be meal, and about 20% of it is soybean oil. So it's it means you got a lot more tonnage to look at going forward. But right now, we're all going to be concentrating on next week's February 8th numbers, and that's going to be the tail of the tape here as to what happens at this point, along with what happens in the weather down there. At this point, the market's really struggled to try to get above $15 here in beans, and even the $6.60, $6.80 values here in the nearby corn. At this point, maybe next week is going to be the thing to show if it can. But we also got to keep a concentration here on new crop, and I've been looking to make a sale of 10%, and I hope that we get one next week on the bounce here, up above $6 on corn, and on the soybean side, up near $14. Or I guess it's 1350 to 1375 at this point. So it's going to be an interesting next week with the USDA.
All right, thank you very much, sir.
It's always good to talk, and it'll be another week here before we get involved with our big Super Bowl here in the U.S. But I think there's going to be two good teams out there. It should be a good game.